Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam. Third canto, part 1, text 26, I believe. Correct? Kachit Purano Purusho Svanabhya Padman Nuvrityaya Kilavritano. Hold on, let me just see if I can get better vision here. Asata urvya kushalam vidaya krita kshanau kushalam suragehe kachit puranau purushau svanabhyo Padmanuvrityeha kilavatirno. Asata urvya kushalam vidaya kritakshanau kushalam suragehe others. Kachit Purano Purusho Svanabhya Padmanuvrityeha Kilavatirno Asata Urvya Kushalam Vidhaya Kridakshanau Kushalam Suragehe Kachit Purano Purusho Svanabhya Padmanuvrityeya Kilavatirno Asata Urvya Kushalam Vidaya Kridakshanau Kushalam Suragehe Kachit Purano Purusho Svanabhya Padmanuvrityeha Kilavatirno Asata Urvya Kushalam Vidaya Kridakshanau Kushalam Suragehe. Lady. Kachit Purano Purusho Svanabhya Padmanavrityeya Kilavatirnau Asata Urvya Kushalam Vidaya Kitakshana Kushalam Suragehe Kachit Whether Puranao the original Purusho personalities of Godhead Krishna and Balaram Svanabhya Brahma Padma Anuvritya by the request of the one who was born from the lotus. Iha, here. Kila, certainly. Avatirnao, incarnated. Asate, are. Urvya, in the world. Kushalam, well-being. Vidhaya, for doing so. Kritakshanao, the elevators of everyone's prosperity. Kushalam, all well. Suragehe, in the house of Shurasena. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Please tell me whether the original personalities of Godhead, who incarnated themselves at the request of Brahma, who is born out of the lotus flower from the Lord, and who have increased the prosperity of the world by elevating everyone, are doing well in the house of Shurasena. Purport. Lord Krishna and Balaram are not two different personalities of Godhead. God is one, without a second, but He expands Himself in many forms without their being separate from one another. They are all plenary expansions. The immediate expansion of Lord Krishna is Baladev. And Brahma, born from the lotus flower from Garbhodakshai Vishnu, is an expansion of Baladev. This indicates that Krishna and Baladev are not subjected to the regulations of the universe. On the contrary, the whole universe is under their subjugation. They appeared at the request of Brahma to liberate the burden of the world, and they relieved the world by many superhuman activities, so that everyone became happy and prosperous. Without the grace of the Lord, no one can become happy and prosperous. Because the happiness of the family of the Lord's devotees depends on the happiness of the Lord, Vidura first of all inquired about the well-being of the Lord. Om Agyanatamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam Bangalam Gayate Giri Takripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinatanam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanyeswaram. Hare Krishna. Shri Balaram ki jai, Shri Krishna Govinda ki jai. So Vidura is beginning his inquiries to Uddhava. Vidura has been traveling on pilgrimage. He has been visiting, as we've been hearing, all the different places he's gone. He has detached himself from his family and affairs and taken full shelter of Krishna, and is, as we will see, or at least he presents himself as being totally unaware of everything that's happened in the few years or months perhaps prior to this meeting. And in the next chapter, Uddhava will reveal to Vidura how the Lord has left this world. But at this stage, at this point, Vidura is unaware, or at least he appears to be unaware, of the fact that Krishna and Balaram have left the world. So he begins inquiring about them. Now, Srila Prabhupada begins his purport by emphasizing the fact of the identities of Krishna and Balaram. The verse itself gives us this principle that Krishna and Balaram are the personalities of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada begins by saying that God is one without a second, but he expands himself in many forms without their being separate from one another. This quality of Krishna is, in one sense, inconceivable to us because we see everything. All of our perception is in terms of distinctions and separation, duality. One thing is not another. There is this thing, and there is that thing, and they're different. Of course, they may be same in some ways, but they're distinct. You and I, we're different individuals, I think, right? Right? I mean, Chaitanya, you're you and I'm me, right? There was a time, maybe Kavi Chandra Maharaj recalls a time in the 60s when we ingested certain substances. Were you amongst that degraded section that ingested different... I guess that's still going on. Yeah, okay. But I remember my trip, right? It was, I don't know what year it was, but it was one of these, there are various kinds of trips. But this one was that one in which the world, it's like, I am you and you are me and we are all, that sense of being one and we're all one and I and me and I and you and we're all one. But then you kind of sit back and think about it. Well, is that, I guess in one sense, yes. We are one, but we are different. And when we look at Krishna, and then we hear that he is also Balaram, Srila Prabhupada comments in one purport to Chaitanya Charitamrita about a discussion between devotees. He said sannyasis, he said two sannyasis, and he gives the place, it was Hyderabad. We're discussing what is the identity of Rama in our mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Prabhupada describes how one of the sannyasis was arguing that this Rama is Balarama, and the other sannyasi was arguing, no, it is Ramachandra. And Prabhupada writes in the purport how they came to him to settle the question. And he explained that they are both correct, because Balarama and Rama are the same. And here we also hear Krishna, Balarama are the same. We also understand that when we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we also, when we say Rama, we can also be understanding that to be Krishna as Rama, Radha Ramana. So this is all Krishna. Krishna and Balaram are one and the same person, and simultaneously different. Different in what? How are they different? That question was posed. I don't remember the circumstances, but I think Srila Prabhupada posed the question, what is the difference? And there were different responses from the devotees. And ultimately, Srila Prabhupada revealed there's the only difference. Krishna is blackish, and Balaram is white. And they dress differently. There was another question posed, I think, around maybe the same time. Who is stronger? Is Krishna stronger than Balaram? And some devotees, they thought, well, I mean, Balarama, is Bala, Krishna in his form as Balaram must mean that he's strong. And this was in Krishna Balaram Mandir. And Srila Prabhupada pointed, or probably didn't point, but gestured towards the altar and said, well, look, Balaram's resting on Krishna. So Krishna is holding up Balaram. So Krishna is strong. So this conception of simultaneous oneness and difference between the Lord and his expansions. Prabhupada uses the term plenary expansion. Plenary means full, complete. The GBC often has their plenary. But I think, Kavichandra, you'll note that the plenary meetings are not often fully plenary. Some people are missing. But the concept is that everyone's together. Now they're online, so now they're pretty well all together. Great. Hare Krishna. But this fullness that Krishna is simultaneously fully Krishna and he's fully Balaram, but in different moods and in different activities, he assumes different forms as needed. Sometimes he will expand himself partially. He'll have what Srila Prabhupada and the Shastras describe as a partial expansion, where he manifests not all of his qualities, but say, 60 out of, or 55 or whatever, different of his qualities he'll manifest in one of his expansions. And then there is expansions of the expansions. And in this way, the Lord manifests himself in different ways. And for us, we must attempt to perceive this oneness and difference in the Supreme Person. By understanding this, by perceiving this, Krishna promises us that janma karma chame divyam yevam yo vedi tattvataha tyaktva deham punar janma mameti sojan. That if we can come into this understanding of Krishna being one with everything, not only his expansions, not only as Balaram, as Ramachandra, as Narasimhadev, as Gauranga Mahaprabhu, but to actually perceive that everything is Krishna. It is all Krishna, and we are also Krishna, but in tiny, tiny, tiny parts as his energy. When we understand and appreciate this, then Krishna says, when you can understand this nature of me, how I appear, and what I am doing, then you can come to me. You no longer take birth in this material world. So Srila Prabhupada continues in this purport to describe how the world is under the control of God. They are not under the control, Krishna and Balaram. Krishna is not under the control of the universe, but the universe is under his control. And then he states that because of their appearance, they relieved the world so that everyone became happy and prosperous. Without the grace of the Lord, no one can become happy and prosperous. So I was, I think those of you who speak on Bhagavatam probably do the same, and you'll go to Vanipedia and you'll go to the internet to research and see what you can talk about. What's there? So I did the same. And I was searching, I was looking in Vanipedia about the grace of God. Because here Prabhupada is talking about God's grace. And when we look there, we find that most of the times when Srila Prabhupada is speaking about the grace of God, he's speaking in terms of our salvation. How by the grace of God, how does it Brahmanda Brahmeti Kona Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. So Prasad is the grace. Prasad is the grace of God. So by the prasad, by the grace of Krishna, we get the seed of bhakti. By the grace of the devotees, we can nurture that bhakti. By the grace of Krishna in his holy names, we can connect with him and become purified. So continuously we think, by the grace of Guru, of Srila Prabhupada, his divine grace, we can advance, hear everything. We can hear the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and understand it. So the grace of God is generally, we hear and understand it in reference to our salvation. In Christian circles, the topic of grace is also very much discussed. And again, by little research, I discovered a term which I felt is appropriate to what we're discussing here, which is called common grace, as opposed to salvific grace. Those who have an American background are familiar with a popular song. Amazing grace. You must know this song. How sweet the sound. What is it? The sound of it? Right. Song. Who saved, what is it? A wretch like me. I once was blind. Right? How does it go? Anyway, and now can see. So that sense of being saved by grace, that is the salvation, that's the salvific grace of God. But there's also what is described here. Here, Srila Prabhupada describes that without the grace of the Lord, no one can become happy and prosperous. So any happiness, any prosperity, anything good in this world is the grace of God, whether we are deserving or not. That grace of God like the rain comes by the grace of God on the stones and on the trees and on the oceans. It comes everywhere. We see it all around us. There are people who are experiencing some form of prosperity. I mean, you have to have a little prosperity to live in one of those buildings next door, to survive in New York City in a comfortable way. So I'm sure you see people, you're going out on Harinam and people are walking by thinking, I am so happy. And they have a certain sort of prosperity and happiness that they're enjoying. And here Prabhupada's saying that is the grace of God. They have received the grace of God, but in a common way, not in a specific, special way, not in a direct way as the process of bhakti goes in. And in one sense, you can say, and this is the argument that, well, why do you call this grace? This is karma. It's not grace. It is simply karma. It is simply and here, okay, Prabhupada, one could argue that, wait, you're saying that somebody is happy and they're prosperous and it's the grace of God? No, it's karma. They worked, either in this life or in a previous life. They did good things and they're getting good results. They acted properly, they put their energy in, they're getting the results. It's simply the machine of the universal cause and effect, or role of grace. We've heard Srila Prabhupada also speak on this topic. It's interesting. He says, when he says this, he says, it is said, as it is said, by not a blade of grass moves, right? You've all heard this. Without the will of God. So I was curious because Prabhupada, generally when he says, as it is said, or as we've heard. So I was, well, where did he hear it from? Who said it? And from what I can tell, it was Mahatma Gandhi who used to like to say this from time to time. But in any case, the purpose, the point is that the will of God is required. Now, it's not stated here the grace of God, but simply the will. So, and then we have the examples that by the will, that the Lord as the supreme controller of everything must sanction. You cannot force anything to happen. We have no power to force the world to respond to our endeavors. We can work as hard as the most that we can, and still ultimately we can say, and this was, Krishna even argued to Nanda Maharaj that why worship any demigods? It is automatic. You work, the fruits will come. What is this called? Karma Mimamsha? This philosophy. Karma Mimamsha. What? Anyone know the Sanskrit of Mimamsha? It sounds like something like anyhow. Sounds somewhat, I'm speculating here, that it's, you do your karma, my karma, it's all a result of me. My effort, I get the result. Why introduce God? Why is there any need for God? It's all going on. And yet here we find Srila Prabhupada speaking that it is the grace of God. So first of all, we have the will, that we cannot force the universe to act. God, the controller, because it is all under His control. Our arms are under His control. Our eyes are under His control. Our ears are under His control. Everything is under His control. We think we are, in control. How many of you have been in a sickness where you lost it all? You had no control, right? I'm sure most of you, hopefully, I once was paralyzed, half paralyzed. I had an infection, went to my brain, and my whole left side couldn't move at all. Even now, you can see that's normal, and that's it. That's all. No matter what I do, how hard I try, I can't make this hand do more. I can't do it like that. Taken away, gone. And one day, it'll all go. How many of you have had COVID? Yeah. Were you in a state where couldn't move?
I lost my taste.
You couldn't taste anything. You wanted to taste, right? You wanted to taste, but you couldn't make it taste, right? You couldn't make that tongue work. We're not in control. There is a supreme controller who is actually in control of everything. And it's Him. It's His energy. So He must will. Without His will, how can anything happen if He doesn't desire, if He has no sanction, if He doesn't allow this energy of His to operate? It just stops. In fact, all He has to do is breathe in, and it's all wound up. It's all inside of him. So that's a necessary perspective that we have to understand, that without the will of God, nothing can happen. So then it's just one more step to understand that His will is His grace. Because similarly that we cannot force the will of God, similarly His will proceeds from His grace. By His grace, by His kindness, by His love, His will comes forth. And by that special grace, so we have common grace, the common grace of everything. Everything manifests by the common grace of God. And then we have His salvific, His grace, His special grace. His special grace that comes through His personal interaction. His personal entrance. His personal appearance. He appears even, now again, this gets even deeper grace. He appears even to those who have no qualification to see Him. And He especially bestows that grace in His form as Balaram, appearing as Lord Sri Nityananda, distributing Himself, distributing Himself in the holy names of Krishna, Rama, appearing so that we may receive that ultimate grace, the grace of love of Krishna, getting the seed to awaken in us our innate love for Krishna. So, Krishna, Balarama are bestowing their grace on the poor, the fallen, the unworthy, and everyone. They bestow their common grace on the whole universe to just make it work, to satisfy the desires of the fallen soul wanting to enjoy this world. They give the Maya. They give the illusion of enjoyment. And then they give themselves so that we may come out of that. The light. They bear the light into our darkness. So we thank Krishna and Balaram for bestowing their grace and their mercy, and pray that we may serve them in distributing that, in connecting others with that grace and that mercy. So, we have some time for reflections, comments, or questions. And I don't know with our YouTube audience if they also participate. Do we take comments, questions from the, and you have the device there. So, anyone like to add something? Maharaj, you want to add some? Oh, we have a question.
Yeah, about the common mercy.
Yes.
How is it manifested through, to what is a special mercy will be, like some impersonal Krishna directly.
Yes.
But the common mercy, how does it come down to us? To meet
Common grace means the will of God everywhere, everything, whatever happens. It's my train of logic is that we can connect that nothing, Krishna is the controller, everything happens under the supreme will and control of God. And the supreme control and will of God is not forced, it's not mechanical. Otherwise, he wouldn't be God. So his will and his control and his everything is his grace. But that grace is common to everything. It's the common grace that everyone receives, whether or not they are sinful, pious, whatever. Now, it is his grace that good works produce good results. It is his grace that nature provides. Now here we have an interesting, I could say maybe an in-between kind of grace. Because here we have Krishna and Balaram appearing in the world. And by their appearance, their common grace of just the world working is now elevated to prosperity. But we note in this that the whole world becomes prosperous, not just those who interact with Krishna and Balaram, but those everywhere become prosperous. Even those who are not interacting. The whole world becomes prosperous. Now, in the process of bringing about prosperity in the world, some destruction had to take place, namely the Battle of Kurukshetra. So, for some, that grace meant was a little different. But still, the manifestation of the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira was achieved by the grace of Krishna and Balaram's appearance. So this is a personal intervention. Krishna and Balaram are appearing in the world by the request of Brahma. So there's a personal intervention and they're benefiting the whole world. But we also have understood that to do this, they've expanded themselves. In fact, Krishna and Balaram, to do the battle of Kurukshetra, etc., expand themselves or conduct their affairs through their Vasudeva and Sankarshan incarnations, etc. So they're not giving themselves fully. They're investing, it is their grace, but it's a step above the common grace of just the world working, but it's not yet that prasad, that mercy that we get when we open ourselves. Jai jatam mam prapadyante tam sadaiva bhajami aham. As we open ourselves to the grace of God, then we begin to receive that special grace. Now comes the interesting part, that sometimes, and Krishna gives that grace to those who haven't opened themselves up. Now, how does that work? You guys are out there and you're giving people, and I'm sure, yes, it's always been a question to me, maybe Maharaj, you have a good answer to this. Is it that everyone that takes a book or stops and hears the holy name did some sukriti in their last life and therefore they have gotten this? Or is it also possible, we've heard of this agyata sukriti, that there are people who you are contacting. And you are, as an instrument, you're giving this a extraordinary mercy to those who have no sukriti to receive it. Am I correct? Yeah, Maharaj.
Yeah. What does the title His Divine Grace mean?
His divine grace. It could mean two things, right? It could mean that Srila Prabhupada is the carrier of the divine, of his, meaning the Lord's, divine grace. And it can also mean that the grace of, that Srila Prabhupada's grace is divine. And both, I guess, mean the same thing. So boy, my grammar is so his would be the pronoun, but it's not really. He is a pronoun. What is his is also a pronoun, but it's yeah, okay. So the pronoun his, is it referring to Srila Prabhupada or is it referring to Krishna? His divine grace manifesting as Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, the carrier, or is Srila Prabhupada's grace his divine, meaning Srila Prabhupada's divine grace. Those are the two grammatical interpretations, and my belief is both. It is that that Prabhupada, like you, you also are capable of bestowing, of being graceful. We have the capacity of having grace on others. We can be misers, or we can be graceful and gracious, and we can, merciful to others. So Srila Prabhupada, he has extraordinary capacity and of graciousness, of bestowing his grace, and that grace is imbued with divine quality, because it is done on behalf. It is motivated by service. To have Srila Prabhupada is the divine grace of Krishna. So I take it in those two ways. Maharaj, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. They both sound good to me.
Yeah. It's both that he has divine grace, his divine grace, and Krishna's divine grace. Hare Krishna. Thank you. We end here? Jai Srila Prabhupada, his divine grace. Hare Krishna. Marvel his ways, his